Hello! It's great to have you here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a historical event, something that doesn't happen every day, and that can, literally, change the course of the Catholic Church in the coming years, or even in the coming decades. Yes, you read that right. There's a new pope in Rome, and it's not just any pope. He chose a name that had been dormant for over 120 years. A powerful name. A name with weight, with a roar, with history, Lion. Yes, the world now knows Pope Leo XIV. And the question that remains is, why did he choose that particular name? And what can this name represent at such a delicate moment? For faith, for the world, and for the very structure of the Church. But before we dive into this prophetic and spiritual analysis, I want to extend an invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel right now. Subscribe to the channel right now. If you enjoy diving into deep reflections, stories that blend religion, symbolism, and spirituality, this is your place. And if you're already subscribed, hit the bell to receive the next episodes, because this video is just the beginning of a series of investigations into the future of faith in the 21st century. Now we're talking. Let's get to the point. For the elderly Leo XIV, the Pope of mystery and courage, the election of a new pope is always surrounded by speculation. But this time, there was something different. From the moment the name Leo XIV was announced from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the eyes turned not only to the man in white, but also to the symbolism behind the name he chose to carry. Why Lion? Why now? And what does this choice want to tell us? Let's go back a bit in time. The last pope with that name was Leo XIII, elected in 1878, and remembered for building bridges between the Church and the modern world. He wrote an encyclical that is still studied today, Rerum Novarum, about the rights of workers and the social role of the Church in an industrialized world. But after him, no other pope dared to carry that name. It was almost 150 years of silence, a silence that many believed to be deliberate. Some said that the name Lion carried too heavy a mission, a symbolic role that could only be assumed by someone prepared for difficult times. Does the new pope know about this? Prophecies, silences, and the choice of name historically. The choice of the papal name is not just a tribute, it is often a declaration of intentions. John Paul I, for example, wanted to unite two giants. John XXIII and Paul VI Benedict XVI was inspired by Saint Benedict and Benedict XV, both leaders in turbulent times. Francis, for his part, evoked humility and reform, inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi. But Leo is on another level. In the Christian tradition, the lion is a symbol of spiritual strength, vigilance, and courage in the face of injustice. And now, Leo XIV emerges. In a time when faith seems increasingly threatened from within and without. Internal scandals, loss of followers, ideological divisions within the clergy itself, and a world increasingly plunged into chaos, wars, moral crises, environmental collapse, and artificial intelligence changing everything. Does this new pope see in himself the responsibility to face these modern lions, or is the choice of the name a prophetic sign, indicating that the Church is about to enter a completely new cycle, perhaps even apocalyptic, in the spiritual sense of the term? The beginning of something greater, mystics and ancient. Scholars used to say, when the next lion is crowned, nothing will be as before. These words, although never officially confirmed, have been circulating for decades in esoteric circles and even among certain scholars of Catholic prophecies, especially those of Saint Malachy, which we will see in detail in the next part of the video. The emergence of Leo XIV may represent the beginning of a silent reform, or perhaps an open battle between tradition and rupture. The choice of this name was not random, and the historical moment in which it emerges, neither. history, and impact of Leo XIII. Before we understand who Leo XIV is, we need to look back, more specifically to the year 1878. It was there that a new pope ascended to the throne of Peter with an almost impossible mission: to reconnect the Church with a world in profound transformation. Your name? Vincenzo Gioacchino Raffaele Luigi Pecci. His title? Leo XIII. The world in 1878. When everything seemed to be falling apart, when Leo XIII assumed the papacy, the Catholic world was deeply shaken. The papal temporal power had been practically extinguished with the unification of Italy. The Church had just lost the papal states. Rome was no longer the Pope's, it was Italy's. Moreover, the 19th century was advancing with strength. The Industrial Revolution had already transformed the European way of life. Scientific progress was gaining momentum, and anti-clericalism was growing, especially among intellectuals and politicians. It was a time when many said that religion, especially Catholicism, was on its last legs. Leo XIII, the silent intellectual, contrary to what was expected of a pope who inherited a cornered and besieged church, Leo XIII did not retreat. But he also did not react with war. He acted with strategy. The main weapon of Leo XIII was dialogue with the modern world, without giving up faith. He realized that the Church needed to reaffirm its principles, but also recognize the pains and demands of contemporary society. And so it was that, in 1891, he issued Rerum Novarum, perhaps the most important document of his papacy. Rerum Novarum, the foundation of the Church's social doctrine. The encyclical dealt with something almost revolutionary for the time: the rights of workers. He spoke of social justice, the role of companies, the dignity of work, and the obligation of the state to protect the weakest. The Pope said, in no uncertain terms, that labor is not a commodity. The man comes before profit, and that was a milestone. For the first time, the Catholic Church placed social and economic issues, not just spiritual ones, at the center of the debate. Rerum Novarum sowed the seeds of what we now know as the Church's social doctrine, and inspired later documents, including those of Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis. Why Lion? Now maybe you understand better why this name carries so much weight. Leo XIII was not a pope of fiery speeches, but he was also not a fragile pope. His name represented a clear choice: be firm as a lion, but strategic as a shepherd. He roared with ideas, not with excommunications. He confronted with wisdom, not with wars. And that made him one of the most respected popes, even outside the Church. And now, Leo XIV? Knowing all of this helps us understand why the choice of the name Leo is not just symbolic. It can be a warning, a call, a stance. When the new pope decided to become Leo XIV, he was, in a way, invoking the spirit of a time that demanded courage, firmness, and faith amidst the chaos. But does the new pope have the same profile? Or is he going beyond, preparing for a new type of confrontation, even deeper, perhaps even spiritual? In the next part, we will enter an even more mysterious territory: the forgotten prophecies. What did saints like Saint Malachy, Padre Pio, and Anne Catherine Emmerich say about the future popes? And does Leo XIV appear in them, even if in a veiled manner? Prophecies and visions of the last popes. The choice of the name Leo XIV was not just historical. It may have been prophetic. Yes, it may sound strange, but over the centuries, various saints, seers, and mystics have left clues, visions, and enigmatic messages about the future popes, especially those who would lead the Church in times of deep crisis. And when these names resurface, like Leo, many spiritual scholars wonder, could this pope have been predicted? Let's start with the most famous of these prophecies. Saint Malachy and the prophecy of the popes. In the 12th century, an Irish archbishop named Saint Malachy is said to have received a vision of all the future popes of the Church until the end of time. This vision was written in the form of a list, composed of 112 Latin mottos, each symbolically describing a pope from his time until the last. For centuries, the prophecy was practically forgotten, until it was rediscovered in the 16th century. And here begins the mysterious part. Scholars noted that many mottos seem to align with the life, origin, or deeds of the popes throughout history. Examples? John Paul II is associated with the motto De labore solis, from the work of the sun, and he was born and died during solar eclipses. Benedict XV appears as the glory of the olive, which some have linked to his connection with the Benedictine order, symbolically associated with the olive tree. Francis, the Pope before Leo XIV, would be the last before the end, according to many interpretations. And then the question arises, if Pope Francis was the 112th on the list, who would be Leo XIV? An extra? A mistake? Or an unforeseen new phase? The inexplicable gap. This is one of the most debated parts of the prophecy of Saint Malachy. Some claim that the list ends with Francis, with a motto that says, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will reign." But this so-called Peter the Roman is controversial. Some believe that he would not be a literal pope, but a symbol of a return to the origins. Others say he would be the last true leader before a total collapse or transformation of the Church, and then a bold theory emerges. Leo XIV wouldn't be on the list, because he marks the beginning of something completely new, a new spiritual era, or perhaps the beginning of the final battle for the soul of the Church. Visions of Anna Catharina, Emmerich, another prophetic source frequently mentioned when discussing popes and the future, is the German mystic Anne Catherine Emmerich, beatified by John Paul II himself. In her diaries, she recounted a series of visions involving the Church, via a false church being erected next to the true one. He spoke of a time when Peter's throne would be empty, and where only a hidden pope would maintain the true faith. She saw a pope with stern eyes and a firm spirit, emerging after a period of darkness. Many wondered, could this figure be Leo XIV, someone chosen not just by vote, but by spiritual mission? And Padre Pio? Padre Pio, the stigmatized saint of the 20th century, also made mysterious statements. Once, he wrote that, "There will be two popes alive at the same time, and then a man of few words but great strength will come, who will surprise the world." Well, during Francis's papacy, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI was still alive. Both were in the Vatican. Now that both are gone, Leo XIV emerges. Would he be the man of few words, a silent yet attentive lion? The figure that many called the guardian of the last spiritual wall? What if all of this is just a coincidence? Maybe it really could. But when a name like Leo XIV resurfaces after more than a century, when he emerges right after the Pope pointed out as the last in the prophecy of Malachi, and when he carries the symbol of courage, combat, and faith, the question needs to be asked: coincidence or silent fulfillment of something that was already written? Contemporary crises of the Church and the world. The election of a new pope never happens in a vacuum. It is always, directly or indirectly, a response to the times we live in. And the world that Leo XIV has just inherited as a spiritual leader is undoubtedly one of the most unstable in recent times. We live in an era of profound paradoxes. People have never been so technologically connected, and at the same time, so spiritually empty. Information has never been so accessible, and confusion so widespread. The number of Catholics is still significant, but traditional faith is disappearing, especially among the youth. In light of all this, Leo XIV does not just assume Peter's throne. He takes on a burden, a minefield, a boiling scenario, the crisis within the Church. Let's start by looking within our own house. The Catholic Church in recent years has faced deep and traumatic scandals, cases of sexual abuse that devastated entire communities and destroyed trust in priests and bishops, an increasing internal division, with progressive and conservative factions in open warfare, often ignoring fraternal dialogue, loss of priestly vocations, especially in the West, with empty seminaries and churches without new pastors, and an increasing number of people are abandoning Catholicism, seeking spirituality in other paths, or simply giving up on everything. The question echoing through the halls of the Vatican is there still time to save this structure? And the world outside the Church? If we look beyond the walls of the Vatican City, the landscape is even more turbulent. See some of the factors that shape this scenario. Geopolitical conflicts are becoming increasingly unpredictable, with the localized wars, nuclear instability, and cultural clashes. The advancement of technologies like artificial intelligence, which raise moral dilemmas about what it means to be human, to work, to decide, to live. Growing environmental crisis, with the increasingly frequent natural disasters, entire populations being displaced, and governments unable to respond. A silent moral collapse, where universal values are being replaced by extreme relativism, radical individualism, and superficial spirituality. This is the world that Leo XIV needs to read and respond to. The expectation about Leo XIV. For all these reasons, the election of Leo XIV is not neutral. It comes surrounded by contradictory expectations. For some, he must be a reformer, opening the doors of the Church to new interpretations, new realities, new people. For others, he must be a guardian of tradition, recovering austerity, ancient rites, forgotten dogmas. But the real challenge will be another: to manage to unite these voices without bending to any of them. Leo XIV will need to take a stand, firmly, but without arrogance. He will need to listen, but also say no when necessary. And above all, you will need to bring back the sense of the sacred, which today seems increasingly absent from everyday life. What does he represent? If we stop to think, the figure of Leo XIV can represent a bridge between the past and the future, the visible and the invisible, the modern man and the eternal spirit. Many popes have faced difficult times, but perhaps none have ascended the throne amidst such spiritual fragmentation. The election of Leo XIV can be seen as a calling, not just for him, but for all of us. Is there still enough faith to rebuild what is crumbling? Is this pope the last chance before a definitive break, or is it that he is precisely the instrument of the inevitable change? Spiritual symbolism of the name lion. So far, we've talked about facts, history, prophecies, and challenges, but now we're going to dive into something deeper. Because deep down, nothing in the Church is merely political or institutional. Each gesture, each word, each choice carries a spiritual echo. And when a pope chooses to call himself Leo, it goes beyond a tribute or a strategy. It's almost like an invisible calling, an archetype, a force that transcends the man who holds the position. Lion, the archetype of spiritual courage. In Christian symbolism, the lion appears from the very beginning. In the Old Testament, the Lion of Judah is a symbol of the royal tribe, of messianic royalty. In the Gospels, the lion represents the apostle Saint Mark, whose gospel begins with the voice crying in the wilderness, a spiritual roar. And in the Apocalypse, Christ is described as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the one who has triumphed and is worthy to open the book sealed with 7 seals. In other words, the lion is a symbol of authority, judgment, divine power, renewal, but it is also a symbol of spiritual battle. When Leo XIV chooses this name, consciously or not, he aligns himself with this spiritual figure of the sacred warrior. It's not a common name in the long history of the Church. Many popes chose safe names: John, Paul, Benedict, Pius, names that convey continuity, stability, tradition. But Lion, it's a name of confrontation. It's the name that appears when there is threat, division, imbalance, and therefore it is used in moderation. Only 13 popes have adopted this name in over 2,000 years, and among them, many were linked to moments when the Church needed to confront the world or itself. Leo I faced Attila the Hun. Leo XIII faced modern materialism. And now, Leo XIV faces a world where God has been replaced by the algorithm, and where the sacred has become entertainment content. The hour of the silent judgment. In Christian spirituality, cycles of judgment and purification are recurrent. The name, lion, appearing at this moment in history, may represent the beginning of one of those phases. I'm not talking about punishments here, but about revelations. Of moments where what is hidden comes to light, where masks fall, where lukewarm faith becomes unsustainable. Many mystics say that before a new spiritual blossoming, one must go through a phase of collapse and cleansing. And perhaps, the emergence of Leo XIV marks precisely that threshold. The roar before the light. Have you noticed that the lion doesn't roar all the time? He waits, he observes, he measures, but when he roars, he announces that he is present, and everyone around hears. Perhaps Leo XIV is that roar. Not necessarily a pope of grand public speeches, but someone who, with few actions, creates powerful waves. Your simple existence, your name, your presence, may be enough to activate a new cycle, like an awakening, judgment, or hope. But here comes something even more important. The lion, in the biblical tradition, is also a symbol of hope that rises again after chaos. In the Apocalypse, the Lion of Judah is the one who conquers, not by brute force, but by faithfulness to the divine purpose. So, what if Leo XIV doesn't come to destroy, but to purify instead? To open a new cycle, where spirituality is revalued, where faith is no longer ashamed, where the Church becomes a beacon again, and not a ruin. It's a possibility, and perhaps it is the most necessary. A choice with consequences. The world is at a boiling point. Humanity seems to be on the brink of a moral, spiritual, and ecological exhaustion. And now a man appears, elderly, simple, silent, who decides to call himself Lion. And everyone, believers or not, looks at him and wonders, is this the beginning of an end or the beginning of a healing? How Leo XIV can influence international politics and the course of humanity. Many people still think that the Pope is just a religious figure, a spiritual leader, a symbol of faith. But that idea is naive. In fact, the Pope, any Pope, is also a global political figure. And when we talk about someone who spiritually leads more than 1 billion people on the planet, we are talking about someone with real power. Even if he doesn't touch weapons, nor sign treaties, his words can tear down walls or build fortresses. And with Leo XIV, this political potential can gain a new dimension. The Vatican as a state many people forget, but the Vatican is a sovereign state. It has its own passport, its own currency, a diplomatic corps, and even a seat as an observer at the UN. The Pope is not just the head of the Church. He is also the head of state of the Vatican. And this position grants you something that few leaders possess: moral authority, especially in times when almost no other world leader has more credibility. The great tensions of the 21st century. The current world is in constant tension. The war between Russia and Ukraine remains unstable, with global repercussions. The conflict in the Middle East continues like a powder keg that could explode at any moment. The tension between China and Taiwan threatens to involve the United States in a new Cold War, or HOT, and the major planetary issues, migration, climate, artificial intelligence, nuclear weapons, are still being addressed with hesitation by the rulers. Now imagine a pope who doesn't have armies but has words. A pope who does not govern territories but influences minds and consciences. And what can Leo XIV represent in this? The name Leo, as we have seen, is not conciliatory. It is firm. It's strategic. It's clear. Leo XIV can become a firm voice against diplomatic cowardice. Someone who, without offending, says what needs to be said. If he decides to talk about the inhumane use of technology, profit above human dignity, or about the governments that abandon the poor and protect the powerful, he can cause discomfort, but it can also awaken dormant consciences. And it wouldn't be the first time a pope confronts the powerful. The example of Leo XIII and John Paul II. Leo XIII challenged industrialists and states to respect workers at a time when poverty was invisible. John Paul II faced communism in Eastern Europe, especially in Poland, being a crucial piece in the collapse of the Iron Curtain. And now with Leo XIV, a new opportunity arises. Confront power without using force. Defend the vulnerable without raising an ideological banner, and restore universal values without resorting to shallow moralism, the strategy of silence. But be careful. Leo XIV doesn't need to shout. In fact, many experts have already noticed that he is a man of few words, introverted, reflective, content, and that's exactly why every gesture of yours can carry more weight. In a world of constant noise, silence can be revolutionary, and a subtle gesture, like refusing luxury, visiting a war zone, or meeting with ignored leaders, can have 1,000 times greater impact than fiery speeches. Can the Pope prevent a war? This question seems too big, but it's not as absurd as it seems. Throughout history, popes have mediated conflicts, sent secret emissaries, negotiated releases, and prevented disastrous alliances. What sets Leo XIV apart is that he arrives at a time when few still listen, but many still seek meaning. And even among political leaders, behind the protocols and the coldness, there is a space where spirituality still touches. Or will he be ignored? It's also possible that he will be rejected, ridiculed, ignored by the powerful who no longer believe in anything. If that happens, he might become a solitary symbol of spiritual resistance. A reminder that, even in the end, there are those who refuse to betray their principles, and that too is political. Leo XIV and the challenge of reigniting spirituality in the 21st century. In times past, the mere appearance of the Pope on a balcony, in a newspaper, or at a mass was enough to move crowds. Today, that doesn't happen so easily anymore. The truth is hard, but it needs to be said. Faith, especially among young people, is in collapse. Not for lack of spiritual seeking, but because what many see in institutions, including the church, is distance, rigidity, and obsolescence. Leo XIV ascends the throne of Peter not only in a world in crisis, but in a church that needs to relearn how to touch hearts. Where are the young people? Where are the young people? Recent research shows that young Catholics are disappearing. In countries like France, Germany, and Brazil, the majority of young people between the ages of 18 and 30 no longer identify with any organized religion. Even in traditionally Catholic countries, what we see is a shift. Many seek Buddhism, Spiritism, shamanism, or meditation instead of Mass. Others plunge into an empty materialism, with no room for the sacred. And there are those who still believe. but no longer trust the institution. The mission of Leo XIV, then, is not just to maintain what is left. It's trying to rekindle a light that seems to be fading, going back to the essentials. Perhaps the path of Leo XIV is not to reinvent the church, but rather stripping away the excess, revisiting the essentials of the Christian faith: love for one's neighbor, the care for the poor, the simplicity of life, the inner silence, and the hope for something beyond the material. In times when everything is content, marketing, and influence, a pope who refuses to put on a show can paradoxically be the revolution that was needed, a shepherd for the weary. And don't think that only the young are distant from the faith. Many elderly people, many longtime Catholics, also experience spiritual fatigue today. They haven't abandoned God, but they feel orphaned of clarity, of presence, of direction. The figure of Leo XIV, if well understood, can offer welcome without bargaining, not promising blessings in exchange for likes, but simply staying. Listen, guide. That's rare, and it might be enough for a silent spiritual rebirth to begin to emerge. The risk of indifference. But there is also a risk. The risk that, even with his good intentions, Leo XIV will be ignored by the clergy, for the politicians, for the faithful, for the young people who no longer pay attention to anything that lasts more than 10 seconds. It would be tragic, but it would be real. And in that case, Leo XIV would become a symbol of the end, the last guardian of a castle that no one visits anymore, an echo of a time when the sacred still moved people, and now survives only in a few hearts. But what if he surprises us? On the other hand, the name lion also carries the ability to surprise, to roar when no one expects it, to change directions with small gestures. And if Leo XIV, precisely because of his serenity, wins over the young in another way, without promising miracles, but offering meaning, without promising easy answers, but teaching how to endure the mystery of faith, this could be your true mission. Not converting crowds en masse, but preparing a new silent generation of seekers. Faith without spectacle in the end. Perhaps the great contribution of Leo XIV is to bring back spirituality without performance, without shows, without applause. That faith that lives in the room, in the solitary tear, in the divided bread, in the silent forgiveness, in the candle, lit before a crucifix. That faith that doesn't need to be displayed, only lived. And if that's what Leo XIV is bringing, then he won't be the last. He will be the first of a new era. Will Leo XIV be the end of an era, or the beginning of something we still cannot comprehend? We talked about history, prophecies, crises, challenges, silence, faith, youth, and power. We talked about a man who, by choosing the name Leo XIV, not only took the throne, he ignited a symbol. And now that he is there, with the white robe, the heavy name, and the silent gaze, the question that remains is no longer, who is Leo XIV? The question now is different. What does the existence of Leo XIV say about us? A mirror for our time. Yes, a pope is a man. But it is also a collective mirror. When the church elects someone, it elects the symbol of its deepest need. If the chosen one was Leo, maybe it's because we are on the brink of a spiritual confrontation, or because we have forgotten what is sacred, and we need someone to remind us, or maybe because there is still hope for courage, truth, and authentic faith. The last chance? Some scholars, as we have seen, say that Leo XIV might be the last pope before a rupture. Others believe he is the first of a new mystical era. Both may be right, because maybe what we are living now is not the end, but a test, a silent judgment. Faith is in check. Humanity too, and Leo XIV, right there in the middle, could be a beacon or a farewell. It depends on how we respond to what he represents. The Pope is a man. The mission, Nombre, Leo XIV, can make mistakes, can be weak, hesitant, misunderstood, or it can be wise, firm, enlightened. But his mission is greater than himself, and this mission is not just his. It is ours if he came as a lion. Maybe it's because the world needs to wake up. The call is for everyone. The world will not be saved by decrees or algorithms, but maybe it will be saved by something we've forgotten. The silence that listens. The faith that does not require proof. The courage to keep the light on, even when no one else believes. Leo XIV is not a ready-made answer. He is a calling. The question is, are we going to heed this call? If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is still searching for meaning. And this video was made exactly for that. Not to convince, but to awaken. So if this message touched you, share it. Leave in the comments. Do you think Leo XIV is a sign of the end or the beginning of something greater? And of course, subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell. Here we don't make videos to entertain. We make videos to provoke the spirit. And the next episode might be even stronger than this one. Thank you for accompanying me this far. May you continue seeking, and that, amidst this noisy world, you hear the roar that matters most, the one that comes from within. Until next time.